happening now. We'd like to welcome our viewers around the United States and the world to the EdTech Situation Room. I am Wes Fryer, and I'm in Oklahoma City, the Director of Technology at Cassidy School, and a busy bee this summer with multiple projects as we're updating our whole student information system and rolling out new hardware and things like that. And I am joined, as always, across the ether waves by the amazing Jason Neiffer, who has been relegated to his basement tonight. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wes. My name is Jason Neiffer, and I am the Assistant Director, Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy, the state virtual school located in fabulous Missoula, Montana, and I'm also the NCCE tech-savvy teacher in residence, where I blog and work on social media and do professional development for the good folks at NCCE. How's the weather?
I was going to say, you're not hiding from a tornado down there in Montana.
No, not hiding from a tornado, but we had a really interesting thing happen the last 4 or 5 days. It went from, we had a high of like 52 degrees 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then over the weekend, it hit the upper 90s during the day. So we've had a very quick onset of summer here. So I'm actually in my basement in anticipation of some house updates, but really I'm down here because it's a lot cooler. So that's the fact of the matter. So
there you go. Now, do you guys have air conditioning?
We do not. So we're in an older home. Yeah, an older home.
But it's nice because you don't usually need it that much, right? It'll only be a few days, maybe. Although, who knows?
Yeah, June, July, August.
Global warming.
Yeah, it's been a little tougher summer here. And the hard part about super warmth in Montana is that our state just lights on fire during late July, August, early September. So last summer we had it wasn't even Montana wildfires; they're from Idaho and Canada, but thick smoke and ash all over the place, and it's not a pleasant thing. So we're hoping that we had a lot of rain this spring and a pretty solid snowpack in most of western Montana. So we're hoping to avoid the fire that sometimes accompanies the warm weather here. So
absolutely. Well, we got to 95 yesterday, and it was a beautiful day today, and we seem to have run our gauntlet safely, which is our month of May and first week of June as far as our tornadoes. So we are not here, though, to principally talk about weather. We're here to talk about EdTech news. And for those of you that whenever you tune in, whether it's live, which I don't think we have anybody live yet, but if we have anybody live, or you're just going to catch this after the fact, you can go to our website, edtechsr.com, and click the link that says links. And that's where we are continuing to update a Google Doc with our news items that we would like. So our show basically is comprised of throwing out some news, talking a little bit about the education slant on it, and then going down various rabbit holes, which are entirely unpredictable, other than the fact that they will occur. So we will also have our mysterious corner of oblique facts that you didn't know about Jason and Wes, but we will keep you with bated breath waiting for that. And if you do hear my dog barking, it is because she is completely wet, and I'm not going to let her in our home. So hopefully that's not going to be too distracting. So Jason, you want to kick us off this week?
Sure. Let's see. So many excellent things to talk about in the EdTech news this week. Well, first of all, let's start with an article that is a recurring theme on the show. I'm a big disciple of Dan Willingham, who's the cognitive scientist that wrote Why Don't Students Like School? Really excellent book in 2010. He joins me in believing that learning styles are way overplayed in educational psychology. And he's been starting to write more lately on the question of the impact of technology in the classroom. And the particular article he posted this week on his blog was new data regarding the use of media in multitasking and its impact on cognition in teens. And there's a link in the show notes to that particular article, which deals with a recent study that seemed to confirm that there is some impact on multitasking with media on particularly memory as it relates to students learning while multitasking with distracting media. The interesting thing here, however, though, is that there is a a deeper analysis here, one of the thing I do not try to repeat myself is that oftentimes studies get underreported here. So I would refer interested folks to both the blog post from Dr. Willingham and then also the study itself to look a little deeper on what conclusions it might have drawn. The reason why I mention this particular week is it's becoming what I would consider to be an important part of my teaching of teachers about the integration of technology in the classroom, that we need to be both cognizant and also we need to mentor students in addition to offering good modeling to students on the appropriate use of technology. And one of the things we have to be very aware of is how distracting technology can be. I know, shocking.
Speaking of distraction, as I'm on my Chromebook, tweeting the link to Daniel's book,
right?
I have not read.
There you go. By the way, the book is super excellent. It's one of the best books I've ever read about education. And the reason why the book is so well thought out is because not only does it provide an excellent overview of the way the brain might work in regards to education and the way lessons play out in the classroom, he then provides very distinct strategies on how you as a teacher might utilize this research-based information the next day in your classroom. And so it's one of the many ways that I've used to judge the quality of lessons that I observe as a casual educational observer. It was very useful to me when I was still in the classroom to think about how I might be able to diversify my instruction while still being mindful of the kind of cognitive psychology that guides the work that we do. And then lately, Dr. Willingham has been very interested and seems to be posting more on the question of how technology might impact all of this. And again, it's deeper than, yes, it seems to confirm that there is some impact on multitask when someone multitasks during a time of a learning activity, but certainly something for teachers to be aware of. I would also note that I coupled this link with my kind of go-to podcast at WNYC's Note to Self, hosted by Manoush Zomorodi. They hosted a great podcast series earlier this year called Info Magical, where they're trying to battle digital distraction. And they say in this week's episode that one of the most well-liked parts of that, according to their viewers that participated in the project, was the single tasking part of this and how important it is to start with one task and move to the end. And they repeat some of the really excellent interviews with researchers regarding cognitive science and how important it is that we don't use all of these devices around us to distract us. So if you're interested in the topic, I'm kind of giving you a twofer this week, a little bit of research and a little bit of suggestion of solution.
So before I respond to that directly, I want to ask you just about research in general. As you are continuing down your doctoral road, do you find yourself looking at articles and studies differently with the more critical eye? And how has that affected, I guess, your view of the news, or has it?
I would say that the biggest impact that on me personally is that I tend to both dislike and push back against those that summarize complex studies in one or two sentences in order to justify their advocacy. And I think this is particularly true of educational speakers. I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek because we both do that as part of our vocation, but research tends to get somewhat abused in the context of advocacy. And I think part of what teachers need to learn to do, and a lot of teachers I know that got tired of hearing that research says have themselves started doing this, but you should go find the source studies and read them yourself. A lot of otherwise great studies have really small sample sizes. They you may remember this term from back in your debate days, Wes. They power tag the study, which means that they may have a headline on the study that is way more simple than the conclusions of the study. And a good researcher always puts things very much in context. And talking about research in one or two bite-sized chunks never does that. So I would say that's been the largest impact since I started working in context of an advanced degree.
This ties a little bit to the article that you shared last week about ex-Googler slams designers for making apps addictive like slot machines, and then how technology hacks people's minds. I read both of those. Actually, I read those articles after our show, full disclosure, because I'm getting better. I read more articles before the show than I have in the past. But also, watched a TED Talk as far as how choice can paralyze. And my big takeaway from this is, and and I won't name names, but there are some different folks in my life that are real Luddites when it comes to technology, and it kind of seems like the main thing they want to do is whine about how kids these days and these devices, and that it's so bad because we're building the plane while we fly it, and we don't know how this is going to affect and all of this. I feel like we all need to become much more intentional and much more strategic and get our toolbox equipped. And this isn't just our toolbox, it's also our own discipline about how many notifications we're going to allow ourselves to have, how we're going to deal with distraction, right? I mean, this is the world. The world is filled with distraction. It's filled with browser tabs. It's filled with notifications. I know at our school, and my wife has done some of this work as well. We work on mindfulness and specific mindfulness training, and really trying to help students be centered. But I guess what I'm trying to say is the answer isn't to just ban all the screens at school and to say, isn't it horrible that these screens are so powerful and so distracting? I really think a big piece of what we need to do now that we didn't have on our plates 20 years ago was helping students, effectively deal with freedom and make good choices and be able to remain focused and not to just do that in an authoritarian way. Although obviously we do that in school in a lot of ways, but with our oldest child now on the edge of college and thinking about freedom and all of those things, you're hoping that you've helped to equip them with not only skills, but just also, self-discipline and self-control to make good choices. Because, wow, in the world of all of these screens, we can choose to multitask or appear to multitask constantly. And part of the takeaway from those articles that you had shared, is why I find myself being oftentimes most productive late in the evening, maybe when notifications aren't as much and I can just get more into that flow experience. It's being in IT as I am, or, in technology support, kind of the nature of the game is to ping. We put out fires and, we've got projects that are going on when we're not putting out somebody's fire. But anyway, it's an important thing to try and, filter the information flood and become more intentional and deliberate. And I'm totally going to check out the next InfoMagical Note to Self. If you haven't checked out the Note to Self podcast, that was one of the things that Jason mentioned in one of our first shows, and that's had a huge impact on my life. Jason, you are helping to shape my life. As that's the cool thing about podcasts and the white or the positive side of our connected landscape, right, is we don't have to go to class and pay to get a degree in order to get exposed to some real powerful ideas that can shape how we think and what we do.
And I would add one other thought to teachers, that if you're struggling with this in your classroom, don't be afraid to be the mentor to students that they need to help navigate these difficult waters. I mean, I've had this conversation a half dozen times with groups of teachers in the last 6 months. It's okay to tell kids to turn their phone over for a minute. It's okay to say, you're the student in charge of looking up information and you are going to focus on something else. It's okay to tell kids to write something down, too. There's a lot of ongoing and emerging studies that are suggesting that writing is an important cognitive process for remembering and processing information. And I'm not saying I really try hard and never to become a zealot about one particular aspect of particularly educational psychology, but I think you should be empowered to experiment in your classroom and to mentor students and try and experiment and fail and try again and experiment and fail to try to find these on a daily basis. And I think that's a really key part, I think, of being a teacher in 2016 with this extraordinary landscape we've kind of stumbled into.
And to recognize that boundaries are essential. That goes back to the idea of too many choices being paralyzing. My mother-in-law with her Alzheimer's, we see this. I mean, you can walk into 7-Eleven. I don't, whether you have an identified neurological or mental condition or not, it is just crazy to see how many kinds of beef jerky. I don't know if it's as popular in Montana, but here in Oklahoma, oh my gosh, but part of what we need to do is kind of curate the choices and then help students choose. And then those are things that eventually we need to do for ourselves, but really important skills. And I guess that I can take that as a segue maybe to my first article. And that is one, about Microsoft, and Microsoft has just launched a project management app called Planner. And the thing I was really most excited about once I learned it was tied to Office 365, which we're not doing at school, and I really hope we don't ever do, although maybe I should keep an open mind, but I don't have one now, is to compete with Trello and Asana. And I had an opportunity to work for AT&T for a couple years, 2006 to 2008. Then was for a while independent for about 5 years. One of the things I walked away from that totally solid on was how important project management is. How oftentimes challenges in our lives are just another project that we need to manage, whether it's on a small scale or it's on a real big scale. And so I've never gone through like the Microsoft project training. I was just looking at a flyer. I usually don't, pay much attention to the unsolicited mail that I get, but there's a project management workshop that's coming up this fall, and it's not tied to a particular piece of software. But, figuring out how we break a project into digestible pieces, how we set up milestones, how we identify the actionables, and then we both hold ourselves as well as others accountable is huge. And, kudos and shout out to the K-12 online conference, which will be in its 10th year this year, which, by the way, if you're interested, we have not had very many. We have a great lineup of keynoters, which we haven't announced yet. We'll be announcing soon. But we have the call for proposals out. And, in helping organize that conference over the last 10 years, that using Google Docs, and that has been a big part for me, a sandbox for me in terms of project management. So I'm not going to use Planner, but I am really looking at Trello, I think, as something that we might start using in our department. What do you think about project management, Jason? And what are your go-to tools as far as doing that in your personal life or your professional work?
We use Asana at the Montana Digital Academy. I mentioned in that article, and it's great because it allows you to single sign on with Google, and based on your domain. So in our case, montanadigitalacademy.org, it kind of focuses people into one similar sets of projects. We use the free version of it because that's what we can afford for project management software. But I couldn't agree more that breaking down piece is really an important cognitive process that I think these tools can do an excellent job at. And I wish I remember book titles after I read them, but I read a book a couple years ago related to information that college professors could utilize based on how students, especially younger students, may learn inside of the classroom. And one of the suggestions that I've really taken to heart when I work with, especially younger college students, is that you kind of need to help them plan things out in regards to what you're asking for. That it's not good enough just to say an end goal in mind, especially for an emerging learner that may not have those pieces. And technology can very much help you do that. It could be as simple as just a big piece of paper and assigning things out, but there are also excellent online tools. The Microsoft tool seems like it's got a lot of potential. I think Asana is a really excellent tool. There's literally hundreds of these available, many of them free. Some of them have premium versions available for free to students in schools, but really great stuff. And I think this is a place where, technology probably makes it better. And I like that notion to you, Wes, too, the notion of planning goals and steps and, adding that kind of cognitive process to it.
Sounds good. All right. Where do you want to take us next?
Let's see. Well, we probably have to do our obligatory Apple is coming stuff. I did post the somewhat interesting guess at what will happen next week. Now I've lost it, of course. Where are you?
Was it App Store 2.0 or was that the?
That's one of them. And actually, maybe I want to end on that one. But there was I think the Verge had a great stuff that we think is coming at the Apple, and they say that Siri is going to be probably one of the most prominent updates this year. That, of course, is something that's very interesting to me because I am in the process of studying Siri, but they said that
I'll tell a Siri story while you're pulling up your list, and that was just an article I threw in that said Apple's Hey Siri helps mom call ambulance and saves the life of a baby. So I think it was in Australia. I have I had tried to turn that on and then hadn't. It was funny because when they were doing this episode of the show, they had to, kind of like they do with profanity, I think, beep it out because they didn't want everybody watching the show, I guess, their Siri to activate, which is one thing I think I first heard Tony Vincent talk about, the limitations of that. If you've got, your cart of 20 iPads and you have Hey Siri turned on, that's probably not a good thing to, do simultaneously in the classroom. So that kind of thing, the individual, user.
Yep.
So shoot. What is this? My Lansing Bluetooth speaker somehow was just picking up my voice and just talk to me. That's kind of weird. All right. So yeah, there we have related weirdness. All right. You found your article?
Yep, I did. So The Verge says that it's mostly software updates, but Siri is likely to get a number of enhancements. Apple Music, which according to articles in the last 6 or 8 weeks, could really use the enhancement. I'm not using Apple Music at this particular point. I did the trial and didn't see a need for it. Apple Pay would get some enhancements. iOS would get a lot of new features. And then, mostly OS updates. The one thing they did say that was super interesting was that there would be no hardware updates this year. And then I saw, Wes, you had posted up an interesting article that suggested that there's already replacement parts for the new upcoming 13-inch MacBook Pro in the supply chain, which suggests that at least something is coming sometime this year.
It looks like new laptops are coming later in 2013 in time for the Christmas season. That's one of the things I'm watching most closely, just because we'll be refreshing some of our Apple hardware. And having been testing and really liking this new MacBook, I also am pretty well convinced now that we're going to have just more external connectors and either go Pro or Air for our teachers. But I am also, at the time of this time of year, got to send out an email to all of our users saying, hey, please don't upgrade, because the last update, killed all of our printers. It took a little while for the smartboard software to be updated. The main thing was printers, though. And we, regularly during the year, because we'll ask people to bring their machines in. And if we re-image them, we have all the printer drivers and everything set up. And that's kind of our preferred way to do that. But
sure.
It's that time of year when, on the 13th, we're going to hear about a new OS, and it may be something. I've gone to cloud-based software pretty much for invoicing and just about everything I rely on, because I used to be in that same, kind of waiting game where it's like, what is my software? Am I going to break my, important things like sending an invoice to somebody?
Right.
Not that I've been doing that a whole lot recently, but anyway, it's, it'll be exciting, but I personally hope that we're going to see Apple really do more in the AI sphere and in the sphere with Siri, in terms of getting it to respond more, not just to a single prompt, and sending us off to Google. I don't know. I think Google really has the lead in all that with Google Now and how much information that they collect, but. It's exciting to see what competition is going to bring, and Apple's, continuing to be one of the most innovative companies. So, this particular conference is probably, I think always tends to focus on hardware. So, yeah. Sure.
So one other thought, and this is a really excellent software.
Yeah, not software.
We'll edit that out in post. So the other article that's really, really excellent, and I actually went back to it twice today because I thought a lot about how this might impact me, and I'm guessing, Wes, this probably impacts you too. But The Verge is reporting today that Apple is attempting to evolve the App Store to deal with ongoing changes in the marketplace. And one of the things that the article makes a really great point about is that, the rumors that, we would all be in an app economy at some point, that evolves over time. It seems to be kind of big players and really small players seem to be doing okay. Medium-sized development houses are not. And one of the ways they're going to address this is by promoting and allowing for people to subscribe to apps. So you can get in an app, that app itself myself, maybe $1 a month. I would hope that they maybe focus a little more on micropayments, so 49 cents a month, $2 a month, and then you obviously get all the updates over time on that particular application. But it's going to cost you to continue to use that. And I thought really closely about this. And I don't like this, actually. I think this would be really challenging for me, if for no other reason than, if I have to start paying $15, $20, $25, $15 or $50 a month for the applications that I use the most, because this model somehow takes off, this means I use a lot less apps. I mean, I think this ends up creating the same problem, but some people will benefit greatly and the vast majority will not. And being an iOS family, Wes, I imagine this impacts, your kind of family ecosystem of devices as well.
Oh, it does. And that whole thing about what's it worth for me personally to pay on a monthly basis. My wife and I were literally looking at money stuff last night and talking about pruning some things back, because it could be kind of creep when it's $15 here and $10 here. And then at school also, when you talk about a per seat license, we're facing that with Adobe. Yeah. Adobe has moved to the cloud. And again, if you're a vendor, hopefully you're not just going to cold call me. I'm still, that's not a fun thing. But I am visiting with our Adobe folks because we've kind of been hobbling along, or I don't know how much we're hobbling, but we're using the client side. We purchased it and own it software, and we haven't gone to, the cloud-based stuff. And so they've got some things educationally. I think if you're up to over 100 seats, and then it's so many licenses, and then it's simultaneous users and all this kind of stuff. That's just kind of the way that the web is moving. But I don't necessarily think that all of that is beneficial. It does drive home the question, though, what is worth paying for? And when you've got lots of free software options and you've got lots of choices, I mean, I haven't personally had Adobe Photoshop for over 10 years, and I really haven't missed it that much. Right. I mean, yeah, there were some cool plugins that could do some neat beveled text and things, but other than that, I mean, being able to create layered collages and do different kinds of image editing, it's not as important. But I will say on the Apple Music stuff, on the personal side, having especially an almost teen and a teenage daughter, they are pretty vehement that we keep the Apple Music subscription. And who wouldn't, as a teenager, want to have almost the entire library of the world, available and then be able to say, hey, I mean, I still have in our garage. Well, maybe my wife threw it away. We had the 10-disc CD changer. Remember those? Sony 10-disc, maybe going on the car trip. And then, you'd hit a pothole, or you'd be, sometimes we go camping. And anyway, you'd realize that, that's, it's not a record, but it still does skip. I remember how glorious that was to be able to have 10 CDs of music and think about all the hours of entertainment. And anyway, it's these kind of things they've just happened so rapidly. Netflix becoming a norm, not being able to, or not having to face ads, being able to binge watch, a series, and then, the access to music. I've heard Ian Jukes and probably Alan November and other conference speakers, kind of lay these things out about how many years it took for adoption of the radio, and then the television, and then the cassette tape, and then the CD, and you see it ever narrowing, and it just wasn't very many years ago that we said, there's this thing called Netflix. And now, I mean, the amount of content consumed there, or the amount of shipments that are going by Amazon, these things have happened real quickly. So I do think it's good for app developers. On a coding side, we've talked about STEM and the importance of having kids, learn to code and learn to not just do the hour of code, but, really learn about computational thinking, and that ties into problem solving as well. I hope that whatever happens with the Apple ecosystem, as well as Google's, can be beneficial for the independent developer, because my perception has been that whole app gold rush was kind of overblown. And while you have a few cases of folks who have done well, I think those are the outliers, and it tends to be these larger companies that are doing well with it. So hopefully it'll be beneficial for small time app developers and enable people who have good ideas to be able to make a decent living. Then they'll just have to figure out how to get their health care if they're living here in the United States. But that's another topic.
Yep, very much so.
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
I think I'll do a security one. I actually grouped your complex password if you want to segue to that. But I saw this on Ars Technica on June 5th. TeamViewer confirms the number of abused user accounts is, quote, significant. Okay, we are like the frogs being slowly, boiled in the water, and it just keeps on getting turned up and up, and we're not noticing, but it's just basically every single week. There's another, it looks like you had some serious red, like you had the cops were outside, flashing their lights or whatever there, Sorry, if you're just listening to this, you missed that bright red flash in Jason's face. So we're hearing about the different hacks, right? Verizon's hack now, and then it's Target, and then it's T-Mobile, and now it's TeamViewer. This was interesting because this last fall, I had a chance to do a series of 5 keynotes to India over video conference. And this is a cool thing about podcasts because the guy in charge and that group, he had listened to my podcast and read my blog so much that like he knew which examples he helped coach me on my presentation and then coached me for the examples that he'd heard me mention or write about later. But anyway, TeamViewer was the absolute gold mine tool that we used because, again, this is kind of mind-blowing. It's basically 12 hours difference over to India. And this wasn't just in Delhi and Bangalore. This was in some more, you say rural. I mean, there's probably millions of people. But it was in 5 different parts of India. And there were some people from rural areas. The bandwidth was okay, but in some of the hotels, it wasn't great. So my whole presentation, I had sent over as a PowerPoint, and then the videos downloaded and had them, have them locally. And so I was controlling it on TeamViewer. And if you're not familiar, TeamViewer allows you to, I guess among other things, remote control a computer. And so, I'm sitting at my house. This is like before school because I can do this keynote and then go to work at 8 o'clock. I had to get up like at 4:30 in the morning when it's dark and have my lights on and everything. But I had not used TeamViewer before, and it was great. So that segues into your article talking a little bit about password security, because we're just going to keep hearing more and more about this, right? And those of us that are involved in IT and security are probably just going to keep on encouraging people, change your ways, don't use the same password.
Right. So I will say that, by the way, TeamViewer is interesting from another standpoint that there are some really excellent videos on YouTube of, these are mostly kind of Linux geeks that are doing this, but they will try to scam scammers, they call them, and say, your computer has been compromised and we want to log on to your computer and get rid of the virus. And what they're doing is they're using TeamViewer, and probably my guess in a lot of cases, in order to kind of decrease the chance that they'll get caught, you use compromised accounts for that purpose. But watching them try to figure out what it is, and they don't figure out that it's Linux, and it's nerdy fun for all. But the Lifehacker article is really interesting because it actually takes a pretty detailed security conference presentation, and it essentially tells you the practical ways of implementing those particular strategies. And part of what they talk about is that even complex passwords, if they're short enough, will oftentimes be hackable. And if you have a password that's 8 characters or less, it's not that hard to buy a machine. If you're serious, like if you're a hardcore, I guess, hacker, for lack of a better way of putting it, you might be able to get access to the kind of hardware that could do things like hack a particular strategy or use a hack strategy on a desktop computer. Apparently, Windows is susceptible to this, amongst other operating systems that could get inside of your computer if someone really, really wanted to. And I think it's really a balance. And I know, Wes, as an IT director, I'm sure you have some thoughts you share with folks related to this. It's understanding you probably need to be using a different good password for every website you use, but also understanding that, as an example of this, you can't necessarily hold the hands of your end users too much, because that can create its own problems. As an example of that, I've been in buildings before where there was a necessity to change passwords once a month, once every 3 months, once every 6 months, and a very complex passwords, and the end users were, never given strategies to deal with that. And so comes the yellow sticky note, and the sticky note goes on the screen with your complex password on it, and then it's not a complex password anymore. And so I think it's a real balance here. And Wes, I do think that you are right that we are going to, at some point, have to come to terms with this, that I think it's going to become more complex than less. And, we're largely saved right now by the fact that our credit cards will, not hold us low for those things, and that oftentimes they get dealt with pretty quickly. But we are in a world that is risky and has risk involved in it, and it's important for us to be cognizant of that.
Thanks for joining us. Feel free to put into the chat any questions you'd like to. If you want to follow along with our links, edtechsr.com/links. We're talking about some of our security news from this week. We need to actually, as a school, one of the things that we need to look at is what we want to adopt for a password policy in terms of enforcement. And so I guess you got to be careful how much you disclose about your password policy, and you don't want to be targeted or whatever. But, universities that I've been affiliated with in the past have tended to be pretty rigorous about saying, every 6 months it's got to be new. And just like you said for that article, they tend to say, make it complex. But I liked in that article, which I did read, by the way, that they talked about the value of the password manager, and the value of Google's tool for Chrome, the OneLock. Actually, it's about a year old. That was announced at I/O last June. Was it called Google OneLock or something? Anyway, I am going to take that on as a personal goal next year, and I have, as I've individually worked with teachers, really encouraging everyone to have a safe and secure place where they store their passwords. If this is one of these basic computer literacy things, and maybe you all live in a world where everyone is uber advanced, but in the world where I live, well over 50% of our users are not using a password manager. And if we take them to a different computer that they're not regularly logged in on, they can quickly be lost, getting in because of the way that some passwords are saved and things like that. So yes, I've done more videos this year about security, and being the IT guy now and director, it kind of, I feel a little bit of the pressure of that. But I definitely think it's one of these things that I was helping one of our kindergarten teachers last week with this, and she's like, my dad could use this because he's always having trouble. And it's like, yes, share it with your dad, help your dad. So do you use one password or MSecure or
yeah. LastPass is my preferred. Yeah, and I even buy the Pro edition for that. And and I also I do try to use a different password every website. It's not easy to do. I have go-tos. I recently stopped using my the passwords I came up with during college, and I am not young, so that was a time ago when some of those passwords first came to reality. And the other thing that I also advise a lot of family members. My parents, my parents-in-law, they're all four of them have laptops and cell phones and are pretty savvy tech users as retired folk, and this is challenging for them. And I think that's exactly right. We need to be also not only helping our colleagues as professionals, we need to be doing the same thing as it relates to making sure that that family members and those that maybe lack the savvy to understand why this is so important.
And if anybody takes me up on this and does it, shoot us a tweet. Let me know. I'd love to amplify this. I think the talk about security and passwords really quickly has become wah, 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 that people are hearing that, and we hear it's just normalized, another hack. And you hear about just millions and millions of records. I mean, some of the stuff that China's gotten about military records, I don't know, we're numb to it. I have just mentioned to my wife this week that next year, after we get all the student information system migration hopefully behind us, I want to go back to some of the roots I love with EdTech, which is interactive writing and student blogging and digital storytelling. And I think that if we want to help get the attention and possibly change the behavior of folks in our organizations, and I know it would be find 1, 2, 3 people who have experienced identity theft or have had some kind of an incident happen to tell their story and then share that within the community. Because I've been convinced for a long time that local stories resonate more deeply and more effectively than stories from out of state or across the country or the world. And so anyway, that's just a thought as far as security, and that might be a way that we can just help encourage people to not just hear the wah wah wah, but to go, oh my gosh, did you know Mrs. So and so, or that somebody we actually are connected to, because I've heard some of those stories before, but it's not something that we've actively encouraged. So I mean, that's a little bit of a different track rather than the IT guys saying change your password. Hey, let's listen to Miss So and so tell her story about how they only found out when her daughter was trying to get a college loan that her social had been, taken years before. And, she had all this, thousands of dollars of debt in her name, and it took years and years to clean up. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know. That it also does play a fear card, and that's not my favorite thing to do. But on the other hand, having a balanced approach and helping people be realistic and not just, drink the Kool-Aid and think that all the EdTech stuff is fantastic, but saying, look, these are powerful tools and we've got to try to be savvy about them and be smart the way we use them. So good for you using different passwords. I'm moving in that direction, but I'm still not completely where I need to be. So your encouragement is needed.
Right. And then one other thought too, that if you haven't looked it up, and this may be a how-to we could do on a future podcast here, is that if you're not using two-factor authentication for your most important accounts at the very least. For me, that means my email accounts, which are really central to pretty much everything else I do. Two-factor authentication asks me to identify not just by password, but by usually a physical object. So in my case, a 6-digit number whenever I log into a machine with my Google account that it doesn't recognize will ask me for my password, my long, complex password, and my 6-digit number, which comes via text message on a cell phone. So you need those two things together. It's two-factor authentication,
Clef is what I'm
that's
using
an
for
important
two-factor on all the WordPress sites now.
It's
got the biometric, use your thumbprint ID, but being able to log in. That it's of course you're trusting that company. There's lots of different layers, but I did a presentation for our local WordPress users group a couple months ago about that. And yes, there's no guarantees, but it certainly raises the bar considerably. That particular account is not going to be compromised if you've got the two-factor going for you. All right.
Absolutely.
See. I guess we can talk a little bit about the AlphaGo. I don't know. We keep on coming back to some different themes here, but the artificial intelligence race. Google has got AlphaGo, and they're going to now. We had news a few weeks ago, or maybe it's been a few months ago, where a very high level Go player, which is known as a more complex game than chess, was defeated by Watson, I think, and that's IBM's supercomputer that also won Jeopardy and things like that. But now we're going to see Google take on the best player. So yeah, I don't know. I sort of feel like some of the AI stuff that's happening is a little bit veiled, and we're hearing about it in these kinds of things like, oh, isn't that fun? It won Jeopardy. Oh, isn't that fun that a guy got beat who's a real good Go player or whatever. I don't know that we've seen the impact of AI yet in the classroom beyond perhaps the truly not differentiated, but adaptive learning platforms. And there's a couple of those I've mentioned that my wife, uses with her 3rd and 4th grade students for math. It's not Front Row, Dreambox they use for math, which is truly adaptive. And then, some of the, I guess, more differentiated literacy tools that they use, like Mayan Reader and Lexia and some of those. And in fact, I'll give a shout out. She's going to present at iPad Palooza in a couple weeks down in Austin, a session about literacy apps. And anyway, I guess that's the way that AI maybe, or that kind of technology that is learning, as we go along is impacting us in the classroom. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier, though, as far as what's worth paying for, because I don't think a simple image editing program, for instance, is worth paying for. There's so many free tools and options you can have to do those kinds of functions. But when you look at something that's truly adaptive and is just incredibly powerful and it's transformative, it allows your students to be able to learn in ways and to go further, than you ever could take them yourself. Those kinds of things are worth paying for in the classroom, and that's part of our challenge as we look at curricula and textbooks and how we fund schools and things like that is finding ways to put those kinds of tools in the hands of not only students but teachers as well.
Right. Yep. And I think that especially for those complex games, although it's important to note that in the case of game playing machines, that you want to make sure you understand how they work differently than a human brain does. As an example of this, what a computer's doing to play a game is it's working out every possible scenario in a matter of seconds and then picking the most likely best move based on that scenario. A computer's very good at that, and a human being is not. A human being thinks much more slowly and can't process as quickly, but we have incredible parallel computing power. Like, we can do so many things at once, many of them automated, whereas computers struggle with that a little bit, even very advanced processors. And I think starting to understand more deeply, why those particular platforms are powerful, I think is an important piece to understanding or having tech savvy about where that process is going. So it's really interesting stuff, and I don't be fooled that it's not a parlor trick. But it's something.
Okay, well, I think it's that time of the show. We're gonna hear some stories that are oblique. They're not having to do with EdTech. It's like reaching down into that chest and pulling out an old photo or an old album. So, you got a random fact from the history of Jason Neiffer to share with us tonight?
Let's see. I do. I'm starting to plan an overseas trip for February 2016. I think is going to be the time. It may be complicated because we might be having a Swedish exchange student come and live with us next year, family friends of my wife's family. But I think either probably November or February we're going to head somewhere off, and so the planning has begun.
This would be a trip to Sweden for you guys?
So. No, in this case, well, we've talked about Sweden as an option, but I get to choose this time, and I've narrowed it down: Eastern Europe, maybe Southern Europe, maybe a stopover in Iceland, maybe. I really would like to go to the Czech Republic and to Hungary and to Poland. But that's coming soon. So, and I'm a big traveler. My wife and I love to travel. We've been great travel partners since we first traveled to Europe together in 2000.
Have you ever made any connections in Europe with any of the independent schools or the DoD schools or any of those places? Maybe I'll tell this as a story. The way that I was able to go to Brazil for spring break this year was because of, it's like this is a multiple dominoes that kind of fell. Years ago at the K-12 online conference, became acquainted with Sylvia Tolosano, who is a phenomenal educator and really into literacy and student voice and writing and blogging. Last November, Shelley and I are in Miami, Florida for the Miami Device Conference, just walking back from the general session and just strike up a conversation talking about STEM. Sylvia says, let me introduce you to my friend who coordinates professional development for all the independent schools in Latin America. They happen to be looking for a STEM, workshop. And so that led to conversations and some Skype connections. It really is amazing to me how much, and this is at least in my experience, EdTech consulting and being able to do presenting, it absolutely comes down to personal connections and relationships. I am excited to be able to be sharing the 3 sessions at ISTE because, I've not done that many sessions at ISTE, but probably circa 2009, shared a session. There was one gentleman in the audience who was in Qatar, and that was why I went to Qatar and flew across the ocean first class from Houston with all these oil guys. And then there's Wes Fryer, the teacher, sitting here going, shrimp cocktail and champagne's really amazing. Gosh, I'm sure glad I'm not down there in the deserts of Iraq right now with, I mean, that was some serious cognitive dissonance. But anyway, those relationships are good, and liking travel as you do, that might be something I'll keep an ear and an eye open for, because everybody, every organization hopefully has somebody who has an eye for professional development, for professional learning, and how are we going to move the needle forward with our teachers. And so anyway, that'd be something. My wife she taught in Germany for 3 years before we were married, and has always dreamed of going back, and loved traveling Europe and all that kind of stuff. So maybe we'll see Jason Neiffer making the rounds of Eastern Europe at some point. All right. Well, you want to do a Geek of the Week for us?
Awesome. Sure. I think I maybe made some references to this particular piece because it delights me so much, but there's a super excellent series on HBO. It's called Silicon Valley. It has salty language and adult themes, but assuming you are not a squeamish, younger person, that's, my understanding, is a very close parody of actual things that happen in Silicon Valley startup culture. Lots of jokes about making the world a better place. Lots of jokes about fast failing companies and the embarrassment of riches that sometimes comes with fast evolving companies. The notion of quickly pivoting when your product doesn't work out. It's now currently in its third season. It never ceases to delight me in amazing ways. It is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful sitcom. So I strongly recommend, if you like absurdist parodies about actual things that happen, Silicon Valley and HBO, super excellent media on HBO Now and HBO Go. By
subscription, or are you opting for an a la carte? How do you get your HBO?
I am a Cordcutter, very happy Cordcutter. I have been for, I think, 5 or 6 years, well before the larger movement. And the agreement I made with my wife was that I could buy as much media up to the amount we were paying for cable. Okay. And the answer is that I never even come close. I never suffer, and I have a Netflix account, and I have Hulu Plus without the commercials. And right now I happen to be subscribing to HBO Now because of Silicon Valley and Veep, 2 great sitcoms on HBO.
What does residential
and I never even come close
downstream and upstream
ever
bandwidth in Missoula, Montana look like these days, and how much do you pay for it?
I have a second tier account, which is the top consumer tier. In most cases, you can buy one up, although I don't know what the down and up is. I have 60 down and 30 up, and I'm paying $59.99.
We're paying for 100 down, and I think it's only maybe like 10 or 20 up, but we regularly get over 100 down. But sometimes we'll have 4 members of the family streaming Netflix simultaneously, which incidentally we have plays going on. All 3 of our kids. Our son is running sound, and then both daughters are in the shows. So they just came in, but this was one of the first nights I didn't have to say, everyone, turn your Netflix off. So that's good. Well,
and I would add one other note.
That's all right.
It seemed really important a second when I said,
I appreciate
I will add one of the notes. And
recommendations
it's gone. So
of media to consume. It's interesting how we find those things, how we discover those things, and sometimes those can be just entertaining time wasters, and then sometimes they can lead. Who knows where they're going to lead? So I do find myself on that note using our Apple TV frequently, just kind of with YouTube and subscriptions. Seeing that again, it's like where the algorithm, and I don't know if that's AI, but it's an algorithm. You like this, so you'll like this, and finding things, and then also just kind of checking out. I'm a big PBS fan. And then there's National Geographic. There's some other things. So just kind of, jumping into some different apps and things like that. And I've done some thinking too about how how does media become relevant and make its way into the living room, right? That's the best screen in everybody's house. So that'll be interesting to see what Apple, by the way, announces, if anything, in terms of WWDC, because I was just thrilled that they have the App Store on Apple TV, right? That was an unanticipated thing that Steve Jobs originally wasn't going to do any of that. All the iPhone was going to have was Apple created and branded apps. But, it turned out that having the App Store was really the huge engine of innovation and creativity on the device. So my Geek of the Week is a Minecraft and coding opportunity. There is a great group in California that's called Connected Camps, and they run after school and summer camps for kids. I have two pretty avid Minecrafters in our home. One is 18 and one is almost 13. The almost 13-year-old last summer participated in the summer camp, and then they ended up making it free. The way it works basically is for preteens generally, and they you pay and there's some verification in terms of identity. So parents are getting kids in, but then they've got moderators that are on there, and Rachel just loved it. She had such a great time. And it's one of these flat world kind of experiences too. And we have these concerns: are we getting outside enough? Are we spending too much time on the screen? But it didn't matter that nobody in the Oklahoma City area, no one was offering a Minecraft camp like this. She was able to virtually participate, and then it became something that she did on an ongoing basis, throughout this year at different times. So they're offering some coding camps, which are going to use. There's a turtle. It's called Turtlecraft or something like that. Or Computercraft. It's a plug-in or mod. I guess a mod is the word for Minecraft that allows to do coding. And our middle division computer teacher had played with that a little bit, and I'm not as excited about that one. It's, if you remember turtle logo and that kind of thing, it ends up getting kids to code to move things around. But on July 15th, I am going to be doing a Minecraft challenge camp for, I think, 3rd through 6th graders, we said. And that filled up faster than any other workshop in this coding organization, history that we've been doing. So I know that Minecraft is like dynamite when it comes to young kids. And it's really pretty amazing to see what kids can creatively do. But of course, you also have to beware of the troll-like nature, which can emerge when kids want to go grief other people's stuff, and needing to be the adult, or in the case of Minecraft, you use software that's going to help keep them in their areas and help prevent some of that kind of stuff from going on. But anyway, it's going to be exciting. And if anybody out there is listening and has suggestions, if you've done anything with Minecraft EDU, with challenge builds, we're probably going to do something along the lines of the Treehouse Challenge that I've done before. And then at the end of, not last year, but the year before, we did a redstone challenge with 7 different things that kids had to make out of redstone, with a team, and pretty cool stuff. So I'm not a huge gamer and don't spend tons of time in Minecraft, but it was interesting to see my son, who's 18, that when he finished all the graduation and all the IB tests, and man, we're talking about a stressful May, just all kinds of stuff. I don't know how many hours he spent, constant in this new Minecraft world that he's downloaded, where there's hundreds of additional blocks and things that they can make and build. And, it's pretty staggering. So I have to think that, developing those kinds of skills and being able to have an affinity for solving problems and working with people in those kinds of virtual environments are going to be things that will pay dividends down the road for our kids. So check out Connected Camps. That was a very long advertisement for them, but, I think they're a great organization, and would love to see more kinds of after-school activities for kids like that are focused not only on the playing, but also on the creating, the collaborating, the problem-solving, all that kind of stuff. All right. Well, Jason, where can people find you online and continue to garner pearls of wisdom from you when they're not listening to our wonderful show?
Probably the best place to find me is on Twitter. I'm at Tech Savvy Teach. I do regular blog at the NCC Tech Savvy Teacher blog.ncc.org. And for more about my work with the state virtual schools, and I don't think I've pitched this one before, but the Virtual School Leadership Alliance, and I can't remember the domain name, so I'm going to There we go. virtualschoolalliance.org. I also do post blog posts occasionally there as part of my day job as the assistant director of the Montana Digital Academy. And I would recommend their blog as a great place to find out more about the great work that virtual schools are doing across the United States. So let's connect. And if you're going to ISTE,
absolutely, yeah. Jason's got news that he's going to be there, so we are going to try. I would like to see if we can possibly even do a show there, which is kind of fun. Back in the early days of podcasting, I remember Women of the Web 2.0 or whatever. That was like one of the first, show. They had a live show, So the Bloggers Lounge may not. Who knows? Things continue to morph and change, but it's going to be fun. Denver is great. It's always a crazy. I think I'll probably spend more time in the vendor hall now than I have because of the new tech director hat that I wear. I mean, some years I've gone, and I just haven't even gone there. That hadn't been where I wanted to make connections. But anyway, if anybody is going to ISTE, seek us out, and we'll be tweeting on our accounts, I'm sure, as well as the EdTech SR to let you know. We should have some giveaways. Who knows? We'll come up with some kind of fun swag. I bet you could bring some Montana swag, couldn't you? Why don't you bring some kind of a Montana swag thing? I'll bring an Oklahoma thing. Oh, yeah. And we'll give it away to some of our live attendees, which we will probably have 3, and one of them they'll all be my family, but who knows? All right. Well, you can find me at WFryer on Twitter, speedofcreativity.org, and most weeks we're going to be here on Wednesday night. So thank you all for tuning in, and definitely continue to check out the blog. Check us out on iTunes. Give us a rating, and if you want to find us on Stitcher or other places, we want to hopefully be on whatever podcasting platforms are out there. We're big fans of the podcast genre, and hope that you will not only benefit from this, but also share the love and let other people know about the value of learning on the podcast. So thank you very much, and we'll see everybody next week.
Good night.